The last day of the A$AP Rocky assault trial was intense. Defense finished up their closing argument, and the state's insufferable rebuttal begins. Deliberations are set to start today as you're watching this video. Even though I think there's some doubt in this case, I still think it's a coin flip to put your life in a jury's hands. No one really knows what they're thinking, but I have a feeling it's going to take around 3 to 10 hours or so for a verdict. That's my guess, but could be a lot quicker, could be a lot longer. Comment down below what you guys think, hit subscribe. Here we go, boys. All right, defense is starting back up.
For his testimony, I would submit to you that perhaps the most unbelievable witness in the history of American jurisprudence, a perjury machine. Again, they could have corroborated a lot of his testimony if he were truthful. Lydia Parker, they sat in their hands for years. They could have tested to see if Relly's shell casings.
Bro called him a perjury machine.
They didn't connect Rocky Relly's shell casings with fingerprints DNA. Why keep it for 5 months in plain sight? I mean, that's where it was, right? It's not like it was hidden somewhere in the house. They had to find it. It was in a box in his bedroom with all the other ammunition, all the legally registered guns in plain view. They didn't show you, by the way, that the shell casings that Relly claims he recovered at the scene don't match the SIG shell casings found in Rocky's house. Relly claims first he said he wasn't in Los Angeles weeks before, but he claims he left Los Angeles after he had the shooting range for those 9mm shell casings. And then he came back to Los Angeles 2 weeks later. They failed to prove that. I mean, you just have his word, right? That would have been easy enough to prove. I mean, how about an airplane ticket or anything else that he ever left Los Angeles and flew back, ever? So where did he get his shell casings from? At 11:45 p.m. that night. They didn't, and that's not on him. That is not on him because they didn't give you the evidence you could have been comfortable to rely on, as opposed to just taking Relly's word. Whether he had him at some apartment in Los Angeles or at some friend's car or some place, who knows? We'll never know. We could have known, but we don't, and we never will.
So he's pointing out evidence the prosecution didn't show.
They could have called Efron's girlfriend, Lydia Parker, who was allegedly with Efron when he claims he retrieved the shell casings.
I literally said this in yesterday's video. They could have called her to corroborate the shell casing situation.
They could have collected GPS data from that night from Efron's phone to prove he returned to the scene. They could have looked at the metadata on the photographs that Efron took of these shell casings, which would have shown exactly where he was when he took those photos. These are things they could have done to corroborate him. They could have produced a plane ticket or receipt to show that Efron actually left Los Angeles. They could have called his A$AP Bari to corroborate the conversation that he allegedly had, or that allegedly happened on November 5th, the day before the incident, with Bari and Rocky, in which Relly claims Rocky badmouthed him. No phone records of that, nothing. Then, of course, they could have tested Efron's casings to see if they came from the magazine found at Rocky's house prior to the trial. Of course, they could have tested Rocky's DNA against those casings or the magazine. He tried to extort money out of Rocky, like on Rocky and his manager first. And I want to remind you that there are 2 hurdles the prosecution has to overcome to get conviction. First, proving that Rocky did not carry the property. And then, of course, certainly they can't do that beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, close. Of course, the judge instructions told you should stop right there if you find that. You must find not guilty if the prosecution had not disproved that he acted in self-defense or defense of another beyond reasonable doubt.
If you're new to the channel, please hit subscribe. I appreciate the support. Back to the video, boys.
The judge gave you the instruction on it, not because he was doing you a favor. The judge gave you the instruction on it because there's a view of the evidence that supports it. Rocky had a property. You shouldn't even get to self-defense. But it's there. It's another layer that they have to overcome beyond a reasonable doubt. When they claimed that Relly used bills as a human shield, what they did not want you to see was after it was all done and Rocky's out of the picture and Relly's already going out, they cut Relly running back towards Ills and attacking Ills again. So the human shield thing is no longer there. Everyone's out of the picture.
They actually did cut that. You'll see.
Goes back and takes one more parting shot at Ills to the left before he goes off the right. Of course, they don't want you to see that. That's very damning to their case. When Relly claims he was in the car with A$AP Bari and supposedly heard Rocky say, at that end, Relly, I'll beat him up. First of all, Rocky is coming, saying he's going to beat Relly up in any lifetime. He's not, I think Relly made fun of him, made fun of his manhood, told him some derogatory name. And what's the proof of that? What's the proof of that conversation that started it all, that showed Rocky's the aggressor? No text messages, no phone records, no recorded statements, no other witnesses, and of course the one guy who heard it, A$AP Bari, who Relly says is still good friend with, they didn't bring him here. Say, yeah, that's what Rocky said.
Oh, sure, they didn't call Bari in to corroborate that. Bari probably wouldn't even come in, but if you know who Bari is and his past. Actually, I don't think the state would call him based on his past, if you know what I mean.
There's nothing aggressive about these messages. He heard the calls. They were late for this Playboy Cardi concert, whatever that is. And
whatever that is. He doesn't know who Cardi is? Come on, bro. How you not know who Cardi is?
He was trying to connect with Relly.
So he's just trying to switch the narrative here. More doubt that Rocky was even the aggressor.
When the prosecution showed you those texts, they wanted you to believe that those were the first messages of November 6, 2021. What you learned was that Relly deleted the messages before that. The early messages that showed Relly's true character. his true animosity, his true aggression towards Rocky, his true intentions of meeting Rocky that night. He deleted messages before giving his phone to the police. You got all this fake animosity towards me, LOL, beat me up, and I wish you would. Give me a reason, and you've been, whatever, you see what it says, I don't forget that word. Really made clear he wanted a reason to fight Rocky. He made it clear there. Matter of fact, his testimony made it clear. He said, from his trial testimony, those were the first messages of the, they presented the other messages from Rocky as the only messages that day. It didn't fit his narrative, so what did he do? Deleted them.
I mean, Relly deleting messages was crazy. That is the most suspect red flag shit ever, and he admitted it several times. Like,
if Rocky don't do shit for this boy's funeral, I'ma beat that end up. He's now ready to beat Rocky up because he didn't think you heard what that was about this.
Switching the narrative more, because that was the reason why they were fighting, apparently, was over this ASAP Josh's funeral. Defense has messages of Relly threatening to beat him up. It's good for their whole narrative there.
Relly's willingness to lie to you over and over again without regard to his oath to tell the truth. He said the message about beating up Rocky, he lied again. Falling back on his usual answers. I don't recall. This. So I then asked Relly if in that message that he said, if the N-word in his text message, I'm gonna beat that N up, referred to Rocky. And you know what his answer was? I don't recall. Because he knew that that message showed his animosity towards Rocky. It showed his aggression and it showed his intent. That's why we had to bring that message out. I had to show you that. That didn't come on direct. July 24th, FU and ASAP, fake ass N, effing goofy. Make no mistake about this. Relly was jealous of Rocky and his success. He wanted the world to think he was successful. I mean, that's why we went through these Instagram posts of his with his lavish lifestyle and lots of cash and private planes and all the stuff he posted. If I said F you, it was sort of wishy-washy with love.
If I said F you, it was wishy-washy with love.
No matter how much N tried, you're not changing. And everything about you, you fake ass N, I dedicate you, sucker. I'm not even going to read this disgusting thing, but this is what he said. No, he doesn't say F you to Rocky. Only wishy-washy with love. There's nothing he doesn't lie about. There's absolutely nothing he doesn't lie about. His actions on November 6, 2021 make it clear. His actions in this court make it clear. When I was questioning him, he became hostile, volatile, and aggressive. I mean, when he flexed his muscles, he cursed in the courtroom. That was first for me. He yelled, and he thought I was disrespecting him by asking questions. He looked like he was ready to jump off that stand and that. And that was in front of you in the courtroom. And just imagine what he's like in the street. It doesn't take too much imagination when his actions were caught on video. Photographs of cameras there after the incident. I went back, take photographs of cameras. Well, you know if that were true, you would have seen those photographs.
I didn't even think about that. They didn't show the photographs that he took.
Apart from his word, there's absolutely no evidence that Relly ever photographed a single camera at the scene. And that's because the last thing he wanted was for the police to see what was actually happening with these altercations. In fact, although he again first tried to hide behind another one of his I don't recalls, he then admitted under oath that when men are angry, they fight. That's what he believes in. When men are angry, they fight. He grabbed Rocky with his left hand, he suddenly switched to being a righty. I don't remember that testimony. He said, I'm a lefty. I'm a righty. You could always ask for a rebound. He switched from being a lefty to a righty.
Who knows what he actually is, but he did switch.
I can see I was stopping a little. Like I said, I'm a lefty. I'm a righty. Well, if you're left-handed or right-handed, it's not one of those things you forget. It's not one of those things you mix up. Why lie about that? Why try to minimize? For a standard operating procedure, when I first asked Relly if he was pulling Rocky back, he said he didn't recall, he didn't know. He was walking in, I tried pulling him back. That's Relly at the preliminary hearing. He tried pulling him back, and that's what he's doing on the video. He's pulling Rocky back. During their opening statement with respect to the first incident, the prosecution also noted that Rocky produced a similar amount of pistols and pointed at Relly and said, I'm going to kill you. Let's break that down. You see what the evidence really shows. First of all, the object was not the similar amount of pistol, it was a prop gun. That's pretty clear from the evidence. Not only witness testimony, the fact that there's no evidence of shooting him. But beyond that, Rocky certainly did not point at Relly. The video shows that, and Twelby told you that. In fact, based on Relly's own testimony, the object was put away when two people walked by the street. And as a result of that, whatever Relly claims Rocky did with it, while they were off camera to the right, meaning inside that parking garage, no, that's a problem for them, because they were off camera in the parking garage for only seconds. Only seconds. Not long enough for Relly to have happened to him what he described after.
Looks like Mr. Lewin has been dealing with a little bit of hair loss. It's very common for men, but I have a solution with you through Hims. Hims provides you with convenient and quality access to hair loss treatments that work all from the comfort of your couch. Hims makes treating your hair loss simple with doctor-trusted options and clinically proven ingredients like finasteride and minoxidil that can regrow your hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. Yes, you hear me correctly, only 3 to 6 months. You can choose from a personalized chewable, oral, spray, or serum treatments to find what works best for you, and this process is 100% online, so there's no awkward doctor visit where you have have to explain that you're balding. I know there's a few of you watching that have avoided these doctor visits, so this is for you, boys. All you do is answer a few questions and a medical provider will determine if it's right for you. Prescribe, your treatment is sent directly to you for free and discreet packaging so no one will know. Absolutely no insurance is needed and one low price covers everything from treatment to ongoing care. Hims has hundreds of thousands of subscribers and they can help you get your confidence back with visibly thicker and fuller hair. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/cuff. That's HIMS.com/cuff for your personalized hair loss treatments. hims.com/cuff. Thank you guys. Back to the video.
Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information.
That Relly said Rocky pulled out the gun from 5 to 10 feet away as he was approaching. We know that didn't happen. And that's 2 days later. The video doesn't show that happening, but of course Relly first reported this incident. He didn't know that there was. In other words, Relly could not say whatever he wanted to say. Rocky was being strong-armed by Relly. No question about that. You see him being choked at one point by Relly, probably pointed out. He was grabbed, he was pulled, he was jostled. Not just the video that you saw, not just Relly. You know who else tells you it was self-defense? Relly, when Relly was talking to Wally Sajek, at a time he didn't think he was being recorded.
There is one sentence in the Wally calls that is really important for the defense. Relly says something like Rocky was acting in self-defense, like straight up.
Here's what he said.
He tried to chest bump me. Tried to chest bump me and then pull out a gun for self-defense.
He tried to chest bump me and then pull out a gun for self-defense.
So the guy wanting 30 million, the quote-unquote complaining witness in the case, the victim, is saying he pulled out a gun for self-defense. But somehow you are supposed to believe he wasn't in self-defense. That's his words. That was Trolley's words, and the video shows that. Of course, when I questioned Relly about whether he followed them, he told you that he didn't. His answer was negative. Because when I tried to question Relly about this, there was an objection saying that the word following was vague. Following was vague. Anyone in this courtroom not understanding the word following, don't shield a witness like that. Relly said that previously under oath. They knew that. And despite efforts, you hear that. Relly, you heard it yourself. Relly testified previously after the altercation by the parking garage that he followed Rocky 12 and it was followed. So why did Relly and the prosecution fight so hard? Regularly hearing that. Because they knew that's not the act of a victim.
That's improper.
And certainly not the one who claims to have just been knowingly assaulted with a real gun. And why did he do that? Why did he follow him? Remember what he said about that? Because 12 put a knife away. That's why I followed him. First of all, that doesn't make sense in any world. You get to assess their credibility. Their credibility is based on everything. The way they answer questions. Did they get caught in lies? Were they impeached? Were they inconsistent? How was their demeanor? When they reached the corner of some mark, Rocky just turned around and started firing. For no reason. He just started firing. And then Relly used ills as a human shield. The evidence shows you that's absolutely not what happened. The entire time that Relly was following Rocky was trying to get away from him. He was verbally assaulting Rocky. Rocky didn't say a word. Not a word, you heard that. Relly even told you that, Relly told you that. He was just the first one walking away. It was Relly who was acting crazy and screaming according to 12. So why would Rocky suddenly go from 0 to 100 for no reason at all to shoot him? He wouldn't, he didn't, and it doesn't make sense. But what does make sense is what you saw for yourself on the video. And that Rocky fired one shot with a pop gun in self-defense and defense of another. And the prosecution played you a video called the sequence surveillance video. I'm going to show you that video, which placed the first shot from 6200 Hollywood Boulevard video over the 1616 East Del Mar video. Before Relly grabbed Hills. That video placed the first shot before Relly grabbed Hills. That was meant to be staged, because that did not happen. That's not what happened. We heard from Detective Flores on this. That sequence surveillance video, that's what it was called, sequence surveillance video, it was made by hand, so the cursor bouncing around there. And it was a rough approximation, his word, rough approximation of what happened. Rough. Where every second here counts. That's a rough approximation, so we tried to put the sound into the video. It was a rough approximation. Rough approximation is not true beyond a reasonable doubt. He also told you the first shot depicted would have actually occurred at a later point if the 6200 Hollywood video was fast. So we know the sequence surveillance video is wrong. In fact, the detective Flores at that point distanced himself from it. He said, I was the one who made it. I didn't make it. Who did? Rocky fired before or after Relly lunged at Hills? Because that fact changes Rocky's mindset at that moment. The prosecution wants you to believe Rocky shot first. For no reason. What you learned on close examination that Detective Flores only first tried to speak to 12 a couple of weeks ago in 2025. Come on. There's Rocky, there's 12, there's Hills, and then there's Relly. And you see him going after, then boom. Second shot. You see Relly still going after. Bill going back there. Rocky's gone. Schwab's about to go. Bill's is stuck in the upper left-hand corner there. Watch Relly go back after him one more time left before he goes right. Bill's running away, he falls. And 10, Relly goes off to the right. And there's Relly. And boom, he's going after him. Look at him, he's tussling him. There's the first shot. There's the second. And look at his arm going back and forth here. Can you go back for a second, guys? Look, you can see the arm going back and forth. Watch his arm. Boom, and you see the head of Bill's there, going back and forth. And why does Schwab tell you he ran? One more time, guys, please. He said he sees Relly coming at him, and he has that something hernia, renal hernia, whatever that is, and he couldn't fight. Watch. He's right there. Then he sees him coming, and he runs because he can't fight. So why is he still fighting? And he just knocks those down, and he was arrested. And of course, there's no idea.
That misstates the
No,
evidence.
who didn't say that? No chance.
Do not debate. Just said misstates the evidence. As I said yesterday, I don't know what the evidence is. I don't think anybody remembers every word of every witness. If this is something significant, as I mentioned yesterday, you can ask the court reporter to read it back. The court reporter will have every word that has been spoken. Go ahead.
Anyway, of course, the court had no idea what was said by Rocky, whose attorneys back in 2022 when he was arrested.
That's also a proper argument to rule aside the evidence.
Rocky do not like Lewin, bro.
Instead of getting the police involved, Relly, according to him, showcasing that things he found, text the photos of his shell casings and knuckle scrapes to Rocky's manager, John Amon, saying he was going to be rich. And that following message was sent to his own business partner, Justin Benea, saying, I want to get this N's money. Within minutes. That was in his mind. And you heard Relly complain in bitterness how Rocky didn't give him opportunities. So when the opportunity presented himself on November 6th, 2021, Relly jumped all over it. Right from the beginning, Relly tried to get Rocky's money. Right from the beginning, without going to the police, without even going to a civil lawyer. So you heard from his own mouth what he knew that to be. Words so catastrophic to his claims in this case that his immediate reaction was to lie and say the tapes were fake. Fake. Get those away from me. You'll tell Deconstructing. Fake.
This is good to show them.
Like, as if that were the reason he took 26 hours of plane to get here to testify. I had him on direct examination for 10 minutes because he was here for two things. Do you know anything about this case? I know nothing about this case. Good. Is this tape real? Do you make it? And is that your voice? And is that Relly's voice? Yes, it is. Bye-bye. Have a good flight back. Nope. 2.5 hours on cross-examination. But you know what was never asked on cross-examination? Not even once. Is the tape fake? Is the tape fake? Did you doctor the tape? Not even once. Which is why he falsely said the recordings were fake. He knew what was coming. And he just said, if I say they're fake, they can't play it. They're fake, get those away from me. Eleanor said, get away from me. He made the tape, it was real. Those were really Relly's words that he said were fake. Whatever his motive was is irrelevant. Even if he wanted to help Rocky.
Just hammering home Relly being a liar.
That's my endgame regardless. I don't give a F about no police. And part of his plan to assault Rocky, Relly sent a text message to him, falsely accusing Rocky of trying to kill him. Obviously, Rocky knew that was false and was shocked that Relly would even make the claim, so which is why Rocky wrote him back. I tried to what? Stop making shit up. He wrote him back. And now the prosecution has alluded to the fact that during this trial, Rocky didn't mention in his message anything about his prop gun. They don't consider one thing, though, about that. They don't consider one thing. Unlike Relly, Rocky didn't have a reason at the time he sent that message about stop making shit up. He didn't have a reason at the time, or think he needed a reason, to create a record of events for some later date. At the time he sent those messages, Rocky thought they were between the two of them, and he knew why Relly understood his claim wasn't true, because it wasn't true. On December 24th, 2024, just before this trial started, Rihanna fears heartbreaking consequence of ASAP Rocky's trial. And he sent it with a smiley face. A smiley face. This parasite is happy if he can hurt that family.
That's crazy. He's wrapping it up here.
So, anyway, what they know, they asked Detective Flores this question. Would you agree, Detective Flores, that you don't need Mr. Efron's truthful testimony to establish a shooting occurred? Well, first of all, you do need it. You do. Remember, after breaking it down with Detective Flores, he made it clear to you they have nothing without him. We broke it down with him. We'll show you that transcript. So you definitely need him. The evidence points to both guilt and innocence. You must, there's no option here, you must side with innocence. If there's two interpretations of the evidence, guilt or innocence, you must stop defenses. That's what the law is, the judge will tell you. The trial rises and falls on his word. With that in mind, again, I ask, what kind of system do we have based on the word of that man? That man, with all you know about him. If you have a doubt, a reasonable doubt, Rocky must be acquitted. He must be. That's our legal system. So it's very simple, ladies and gentlemen. If you do not believe Torella from beyond reasonable doubt, he must be acquitted. That's the law. It's not been proven. In the case of reasonable doubt, whether guilt is satisfactorily shown, if you have a reasonable doubt about this case, about the testimony, about the double talk, about the lies, the perjury, the manipulation of evidence, destruction of evidence, Efron's motives, it's over. It's over. You must acquit Rocky according to the law. Is that true? Well-meaning juries didn't have evidence.
This is improper argument.
So many objections shot down today.
And let me ask you this. Do you think you've seen clear and convincing evidence in this case that Terrell Efron is truthful, that he's believable, that he's honest, that he's honorable, does not have financial motive in this case, that is to be believed and trusted? They can't even meet the clear and convincing standard, let alone the highest standard in our legal system, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not even close. If you think someone may be guilty, that's not enough. If you think perhaps they're guilty, that's not enough. If you suspect they might be guilty, that's not enough. Possibly guilty, it's not enough. Probably guilty, not enough. Guilty likely, not enough. Guilty highly likely, not enough. It has to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
He's doing good. He's doing good.
Look, my time is almost up. I want to apologize to you again for when that this journey is taken. We may be precluded from standing up again and saying, wait a minute, here's an answer to that. Wait a minute, ladies and gentlemen, you have an answer. But you can substitute your common sense. You all can substitute your common sense. Your judgment in that place, and that's required for this journey. In this journey towards justice, you can substitute your common sense. You can respond for it. Not out loud, don't do that. I do think after careful deliberation that it might be fair to suggest 10 questions that literally hang in the air in this courtroom at this very moment. And as the time approaches for you to decide this case, for us to hand the baton to you as you will, I offer these questions now as the most important challenge to the prosecution. The prosecution claims it's met its burden in this case. They claim that. Well, if the burden has in fact been met, then you'll be given logical, sensible, credible, satisfying answers. But I'm going to show you those 10 questions. Here they are. Let me go over them with you, one by one, very briefly.
What is this banging?
Question number 1. Other than Relly's word, what evidence is there that he photographed shell casings at the scene? Okay, there is none. We know that. Because even though they have photographs from his phone.
Great point. The metadata of the location of the photos was not there. So you could have staged the photo of the shell casings.
Where those photos were taken. We also know that ain't at his GPS location at 11:45 that was shown, where, other than Relly's word, what evidence is there that the shell casings even came from the scene? No evidence other than his word. Lydia Parker's not here. Other than Relly's word, what evidence is there that he even went back to the scene? Because now we know he swears that at 11:09, that's not him. That's not him anymore.
Putting these questions in front of the jury to cast out.
Other than Relly's word, what evidence is there that he ever left Los Angeles after going to a shooting range, shooting off 9mm, by the way, 2 weeks before the incident? Again, it's just his word that he left Los Angeles 2 weeks before. Other than Relly's word, what evidence is there that the scrapes on his knuckles were gunshot wounds? He didn't have to comment on that. Number 6, other than Relly's word, what evidence is there that a conversation ever happened on November 5th, to set the tone for November 6th, between ASAP Bari and Rocky? Other than his word, there was no ASAP Bari, there's no phone records, so we just have to take Relly's word that happened. In light of Lou Levin's testimony, in light of Lou Levin and 12B's unimpeached testimony, other than Relly's word, what evidence is there that Rocky did not carry a problem? Other than Relly's word, no evidence of a shooting, nothing from either video says that's not a problem. None. Other than Relly's word, what evidence is there that he was shot by an operable semi-automatic firearm? Again, other than his word, No evidence whatsoever. Number 9, this one's my personal favorite. Number 9, how is it that you do not need Relly's truthful testimony, remember that question, to establish a shooting occurred when Detective Flores told you, A, the parking garage video does not show an operable gun. That's his testimony. So let me break it down this way. Video 1 alone, you don't know if the gun's operable, correct? Correct. B, the video from 1616 Beast Del Mar does not show if there's any gun at all. The answer to that was specifically just looking at that and not looking at anything else, no. The sound heard on the video from 6200 Hollywood Boulevard may have come from a replica firearm, according to Detective Flores. No evidence of an operable gun in one video. No evidence of a gun at all, or any shooting in the second video. No evidence that there was a shooting or an operable firearm. And number 10, given that Relly told you he would lie whenever he wants, you saw him commit perjury multiple times. Relly told you he will commit perjury when he doesn't want to answer a question. How can you trust Relly with a matter of importance in your life, the life of a loved one, or the life you sit in judgment of? I don't know how they answer those questions. By your decision, you control this very life of your hands. Treat it carefully, treat it fairly, be fair. Do the right thing. Remember the testimony of Terrell Efron and ask yourselves if you would trust him with any matter of importance in your life. And if the answer is no, you can't trust him with a matter of importance in his life.
Okay.
The case rises and falls, as you just saw with him. But when it comes to the facts in this case, it's your court. When it comes to what's right in this case, it's your court. When it comes to what's fair in this case, it's your court. No one will take that money. This is your court right now. I'm going to tell you something. What happened here isn't right. Think about that. Because if the message we're going to be sent out, that proof like this is enough to convict one of us, one of our citizens, none of us have a chance.
Laying it all on the line. This shit's intense. But now the state's going to have a rebuttal here, and it's going to be insufferable because Lewin is going to talk for probably 2 hours. Oh, God. Here we go. Lewin's up.
Over lunch, I had a nightmare that when I was going to come back up here, that Mr. Tacopina was only half done. Do not confuse the length of that argument with the persuasiveness of it.
You're talking? I think Tacopina was shorter than everyone else.
What we kind of have gotten away from is why we're here. So this is the case of People versus Raheem Mayer. This is not People versus Mr. Efron. It's not People versus John Lewin. It's People versus Raheem Mayer. And the reason that I point that out is because if you didn't know better and you listened to the closing, you would think that either Relly was on trial, maybe I was on trial, and we're not on trial. This is Randy's Donuts. This is on the corner. You're looking at Randy. This is in Inglewood, on the corner of basically, this is the exit from 405. You come in, we're looking northbound. 30 years ago, when I was a young deputy in Torrance, I used to drive from home, and I would have to take this route on the 405. And I would, every day, I would get off on the 405, and I would tell myself that if God wanted me to get a donut, he would make sure that the light that you can't see right here was red. As you can see, God wanted me to have a lot of donuts. I ended up most of the time, I stopped. But there came a time where it just wasn't good enough for me to take the chance on the light. So what I would do is, it's a really long straightaway, and you can see when you're getting off the freeway, you can see that light. So what I would do is literally, I would coast my car at 20 or 25 miles an hour, making sure that I hit the red, and then I'd go in and I'd get that donut. And I bring this up because passing up that donut was extremely difficult for me.
Why are we talking about your fat ass getting donuts 20 years ago, bro?
And most days I wasn't able to do it. And I always thought that that's probably one of the hardest things that I would have to do. And then I became a trial lawyer.
Isn't this a rebuttal? He needs to be going at the throat of what Tacopina just said, not life stories.
What's amazing about this case is how little, in the end, Relly's credibility or anything that matters in the case is really an issue. Now, it certainly could have been an issue. There could have been a defense in this case. There could have been, where the defense put out evidence and they said, hey, listen, Relly, you can't see it, but Relly, when he came, had a weapon. And he said, I'm going to kill you. And the defendant at that point in time pulled a gun to defend himself. And the situation ended and Relly followed. And he threatened again, and he pulled out another gun. And that would have been difficult for us to counter, not because it's true, but because the evidence that you would have been given. That's not the defense they chose. The defense they chose, this case comes down to one issue only. They are saying it's a prop gun. If it's a prop gun, he is absolutely not guilty of the charges. Not because he didn't pull it, not because he didn't fire it, but because under the law, if it's not a real firearm, it's not a violation of Penal Code Section 245. It's still self-defense. That's not true. If it is a prop gun, there is no self-defense. And the only way you can get to self-defense in this case is you have to find, one, that it was a real gun. It clearly was a real gun. There's no question there. It was a real gun. The prop gun is a figment of the defense and the witnesses who testified to it. You have to find that not only is it a real gun and that it was fired, but that the defendant was defending other individuals or himself, and that the force that he used was necessary. And ladies and gentlemen, he wasn't defending anybody else. Force was not necessary. I have no idea what you 12 jurors are thinking. I have no idea. I have no idea if some of the crazy arguments by the defense, gosh, maybe somebody believes them.
This is so funny. Just trying to downplay all the great points by the defense. Like there isn't doubt in this case or anything. Just, oh, it's ludicrous. Crazy points.
But you know what I do want to explain? I want to explain for a second what happened with Relly and who he is and what he's been through.
So not even trying to defend Relly's credibility, which is a huge part of this case, but just kind of accepting, yeah, Relly sucked.
Pointing out the fact that Relly was not honest about buying a property in Miami. Now you need to ask yourselves, what does his property in Miami have to do with what happened on November 6th? Nothing. But he would say, well, but wait a minute. If Relly is not being truthful about that, you don't have to believe about anything. I'm going to get to why that is not what the instructions actually direct you to do. But I want to do something more. I want to do something better. I want to explain to you from the evidence why Relly was up there doing what he did. The defendant is an extremely powerful individual. His wife is even more powerful. Relly found himself in a situation where he was on the wrong side of that power divide. And by the way, it doesn't matter why he got there, but you know why. You heard it. There was a disagreement about ASAP Josh and about what happened to him and what was going to be paid. And what's important is that Relly and the defendant had a disagreement about it. That's what happened. And because of that disagreement, and because of ego, this is what happened. You got how many lawyers over there? How many people? There was a point in time during jury selection where they almost had a football huddle. There were like 8 or 9 of them over there. Do you think for one moment, 1 millisecond, that if those individuals had something positive to say to help the defendant, that they would have called those individuals? If, for instance, Relly's injuries could not have been caused by a graze wound, they would have called a witness. So what you're left with is, Relly didn't have that wound when it started. He testified that he felt heat going through his hands instantly. So the idea that, well, it's a minor wound, that's true. But we're not here to talk about the consequences. We're not here to talk about what damages Relly should get, what damages he shouldn't get. But let's remember something. That man shot him. That man took away the career that he had. I don't know what that's worth. $30 million sounds a bit excessive to me, but I'm not the lawyer in that trial, and you're not the jury. So that will be hashed out, that will be debated, and that will be eventually decided upon. And we know, there's no question, the defendant is proud, okay? And I'm gonna give you another word because I'm not gonna hide from it. He's entitled, all right? Everybody runs around. He is a big, important man, and everybody serves him. This is just a small example, but it's important. The witnesses who came in are dependent upon him financially. They're dependent upon him for their careers. And what happened in the middle of a trial, with 12 on the stand, 12's asked a question. Has anyone ever seen or heard a defendant yell out to a witness in front of the jury, don't answer that? That's what happens when you have a lot of power. And no one has ever told you, you know what? So why did he take out the gun and fire those shots?
Oh no, he told his friend not to answer a question about what his creative agency stands for.
But you can see Rocky make a movement behind his back and pull out a firearm. Pull out, you can't tell what it is, but he's gonna pull it out of his mouth. And at that point in time, he's gonna start advancing to where Relly and Ills are. That is what Relly responds to, is that firearm being pulled out. Yes, he grabs Ills before the first shot is fired because he's trying to avoid getting shot. So again, the timing of which shot it is.
So that's a debate right there. They just admitted Relly grabbed Ills before the first shot. Defense says Rocky was just shooting the prop gun to protect Ills.
That man decided that his ego and his vendetta and his anger at Relly was important enough that he was going to risk not only Relly's life or Ills' life, but he was going to fire 2 shots from a 9mm firearm in the middle of Hollywood. Some tourist walking down Hollywood Boulevard with her family, all of a sudden drops dead because they've been shot in the head by a bullet that somebody selfishly fired to settle a childish dispute.
It was a little bit of a misrepresentation, hinting that Rocky shot someone in the fucking head, an innocent person walking down the street. He just pointed out that that's a possibility, okay? Well, it didn't happen though, so shut the fuck up.
That's what happened in this case. That man decided, you know what? I'm angry, and I'm going to show him.
How does he know what Rocky was thinking?
This case could and easily could be a 5-minute verdict. And here's why. Because once you decide that this was not a prop gun, and ladies and gentlemen, it's not a prop gun. I'm going to go through all the reasons. And once you decide that,
Really trying to entice the jury to do a quick verdict here. Might backfire.
because that's the defense in the case. Not, as Mr. Tacopina tried to argue, well, it's self-defense. You notice, Mr. Tacopina didn't actually reach the next step. He talked about self-defense, but he never explained to you, for it to be self-defense, you have to find that it was a real gun. That's what you have to find. If you have a question about that, you ask the court. You have to find, to get to self-defense, that it was a real gun. And their defense in this case was, it was a prop gun. That's the issue in this case. Was it a prop gun or was it not? If you find it's a prop gun, all I can say is, you know what? You really need to examine why you're getting there. And I'm going to bring up something that's really important. The defendant is a celebrity. His wife's an even bigger celebrity. Many of you know who they are. They brought in 2 adorable children yesterday for closing argument. Now, they haven't been here at any other time. And you have to ask yourselves, those kids have a right to be there. Why children that age would be here in a situation like this, don't know. But you have to ask yourselves, am I going to let my feelings of not wanting to convict the defendant? You are not allowed to consider how this might affect Rihanna or his kids. And there's a very simple reason. We are all in the world responsible for what we do. They elected to put on a defense that killed their case. It destroyed it. And I'll go through it. It started with Wally. And what's amazing is the defense, their witness, they put on the evidence from Wally, which is some of the most crucial evidence in the case. They've already conceded the other gun. They say it's prop gun. We would have had to concede, we would have to prove, that the defendant assaulted Relly with the gun. Well, they've conceded that. They just say it was a prop gun. We don't have to prove whatsoever that the defendant shot Relly, although that's what the evidence demonstrates. So very little in this case is in dispute, and that is hugely important. The defense is saying, well, why didn't you bring Bari in to us? Bari is the guy, if you remember, who posted, who is calling Relly a rat or a snitch. I can't remember which it is right now. The people's position is that Bari is not credible.
Hold on. How do they know that he's not credible? I'm pretty sure it got pointed out that they never even reached out to Bari once.
And what do you think would have been the response from the defense if we would have brought ASAP Bari in, and ASAP Bari would have lied the same way Twelby lied, and Wally lied, and ASAP Lou lied? So he's his close friend. If that guy was going to help him, they would have called him. And they have the power of the subpoena just like we do. And in fact, he's the defendant's friend. They know where he is. They're able to access him. So the fact that he's not here, do not get caught up in that game.
Well, it's because Bari has some allegations. Rocky ain't trying to associate with Bari. Google ASAP Bari allegations, if you know what I'm saying. Never mind, not allegations. He pled guilty to something in 2019.
Let's get to it. Stop ducking my calls. Now, by the way, Relly says, hey, listen, I'm not really sure what's going to happen. And when you look at it, it looks like they're going to have a disagreement. But this is really important. Relly can kick the defendant's ass all day, okay? That's clear. But if Relly does that, he loses his life. He doesn't have any interest in doing that. He knows it, the defendant knows it, everybody knows it. Even those lying witnesses, Twelby and Lou, eventually had to concede that the defendant has a lot of power.
Doesn't that help the self-defense theory of him pointing out that Relly is huge again?
So he's got not only no motivation for getting into a fight with the defendant, he can't do it. He's got to sit back and take whatever he's going to take. Because he's power. That's who he is. He's got power. There's Rocky and there's Relly. Rocky knows it and Relly knows it. That's just the facts of life. And you're going to see that the first action is the defendant grabbing Relly. That's what you're going to see as they're walking up. I have this is slowed down. So what you saw, the defendant grabs his arm. Now the defendant is pushing him forward. Relly is holding him back. Now this is really important. I would ask Twelby, so what was the weather like on that night? Man, it was cold. And Relly, he's huge. He's got muscles all over his body. They made Relly out to be the Hulk.
I mean, he's 210 pounds. Rocky's like 170, 160 probably, bro.
So the gun went back because you see the people that are on top? They're walking from the direction where Rocky just was. Now, why Rocky put that gun away, we're never going to know. I can't prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt why he put the gun away. No one can. I can tell you that the evidence suggests, clearly, it's undisputed, there's a couple of people walking right by. It's in the middle of Hollywood, and Rock's a pretty famous person, and if he was planning on shooting the gun at that point in time, that would really seem to be a ill-advised place to do it. Because what you're going to see here is, you're going to see that the incident starts before Relly ever grabs Ills. The idea that, well, the gunshot doesn't happen until after he grabs Ills. It doesn't matter. Relly's responding to the fact that Rocky's pulled a gun on him for the second time. And by the way, this is a lot scarier than the first time. Because now they're by themselves, and clearly, Relly is concerned he's about to get shot. Now, I'm going to get to it and I'm going to address it, but this doesn't even begin to cover the idea that their defense is not just this was a prop gun, which is absurd. It's an absurd defense. Their defense is it's a prop gun, and Relly knew it was a prop gun. And even though Relly knew it was a prop gun, Rocky pulled it on him to scare him, even though, by their own admission, he knows it's fake. And you can see Relly running around, and you can see what 12 does, and you can see what Rocky does, and no one is acting like it's a prop gun because it isn't. So let's watch it. Boom, guns out.
He keeps pausing it before Relly goes back and hits Ills every time. And apparently this is the wrong sequence of video linked with the audio. This is the incorrect one. I'm seeing people on Twitter pointing out that this is the wrong timed audio.
And by the way, he moves into a better position in between the shots. And the only reasonable conclusion you can reach from that is that he is trying to get a line of fire onto Relly. Relly didn't suffer the minor injury because the defendant didn't try to shoot him. He suffered the minor injury because he used Ills as a shield, and for whatever reason, the defendant didn't hit him. But the idea that you need to look at the gunshot and the fact that Relly is already grabbing Ills as a shield, that's just misleading. It just doesn't work. Why is everybody running around? Why is Relly grabbing Ills as a shield? Why is 12 running away? By the way, how does this incident end? This incident ends not because the defendant voluntarily says it's over. 12 literally is blocking him and pushing him away. The defendant's fired up. He's angry. We don't know what's going to happen next, but it's not as if the defendant decided on his own, you know what, I'm done. 12 pushes him away. So here we go, boom, you see him reach, guns out. 12 moves. Relly is running, trying to get behind Ills. He's not beating Ills. And what is Rocky doing? He's running around, trying to get a shot, and he's going to fire. And when he fires a second time, the gun is outstretched, aiming at Relly. And now look, there's 12 grabbing him and making the defendant go away. That's how this thing ends. Again, and I understand it. You guys don't want to believe that this man who has everything, is going to give it all up for this. I get it. But that's a decision he made. I didn't make it for him. You didn't make it for him. The judge didn't. Mr. Capapina didn't. He made that decision on November 6th. And what's crazy is that apparently Relly would have been more than willing to take the money and not cooperate with anybody. And by the way, why is that? Do you think that if you are in the hip-hop rap community, that going to the police and filing a case against ASAP Rocky is going to help your career? It's done. When Rocky was saying, and you heard it before, hey, I'd be on the beach, he would have been on the beach. So not only did the defendant commit this violent crime, but in the end, his attitude was, no, I'm not giving you anything. But here's what we know. They didn't find any casings. Meaning, if the defendant's position is correct, if the defense position was a prop gun is correct, there should have been casings there for the prop gun. They weren't. And what we know is, Relly went back and he found them. And I'm going to go through and explain to you why that's credible evidence. So what happens? He goes back, he texts and he says, hey, you tried to kill me, okay? What are you talking about? Why are you telling people I shot you? What the defendant says. By the way, the defendant's position now, their defense is that he shot him and it was just a prop gun. So the question isn't that the defendant is lying here. He clearly is lying. He's just saying, oh no, it's a prop gun. Relly says, you tried to set me up and take me from my daughter. He is saying, you tried to kill me that night in that text. And what's the defendant's response? Not, hey, that was a prop gun. It's stop making shit up. So this is what they say is the big evidence in this case. Yes, Relly decided that rather than cooperate with the police, he was going to try to get a bunch of money. Relly never, ever, ever has been inconsistent in the fact that the defendant shot him, that he got hit. Never. Sure, was he not upfront about owning property in Miami? Some of the questions. How did you make money in 2021? Is this a picture of your girlfriend? Imagine if you are sitting here on a case that is being live streamed. You got the camera here. You've already been threatened. Your family's been threatened. Your daughter's been threatened. Your girlfriend's been threatened. And now someone is going to ask the defense attorney, what your girlfriend's name. Let me show you a picture of her for the world to see. What do you expect Relly to do? When the defense says, well, we only brought Wally out here to testify to one thing. That's true. They easily could have played the call. There's no magic form where we got to play and they don't. They're arguing that Relly is inconsistent.
The objection could not play that role.
I didn't hear the answer. That's what I'm saying. The defense could have played the entire call. They didn't.
That was the objection.
So we decided that we were going to play the entire call. And you can listen to this call. Let me tell you what's so important about the call.
So you're talking about obviously the recorded phone calls where he didn't know he was being recorded. It is important to note that this was after Rocky was already charged and arrested. So obviously he's not going to change his story after that arrest date.
When you listen, I'm going to play it. Wally's testimony was he knew nothing about this incident before this phone call. Yet, you're going to hear him say, I'm not here to pick sides. So that's a straight lie. Of course he knew about it. He's Rocky's good friend. It's already been in the media. It's been blown up in hip-hop websites. Of course he knows about it. And when you listen, what is so crucial about this statement is this is Relly, live, not a courtroom, not to a police officer, to a friend, where he's got no motive to make up anything, where he's explaining what happened. And he is literally incredulous. When you listen to this, what's going on is...
I mean, this call definitely isn't good for the jury to hear the full call because it's unfiltered, but it is after the arrest date, so it changes things. But Tacopina also pointed out that this was after the arrest date, so...
Prosecution, you did not call a witness to come in here and say that that is a wound from a gun. How is somebody going to be able to come look at an injury and tell you where it came from? Now, here's what you have to ask yourself. If there was something about that injury that was inconsistent, where it could not have come from a firearm.
Is this an exhibit? It's not evidence.
I believe this is the incorrect exhibit. Is this the incorrect? Oh, you know what? Hold on, let me back it up. That's my fault. I have the wrong picture. Excuse me. The same. Let me change it. Thank you. Okay, this is the correct exhibit.
Lewin sneaks in a different picture of the wound, even though it's not a big deal, but still.
Look at the fact that they called in Wally. The purpose of calling Wally, bring him out from France, for thousands of dollars, obviously, was to simply impeach Relly with the fact that it was his voice. So if there was a medical professional who could come in here and tell you, well, that didn't come from a gunshot, you would have heard from them. And the failure to call a logical witness is something you can consider, and you should consider. And when the defense says, wait a minute, the people didn't call somebody in to testify, well, you have to ask yourself, if we call someone in to testify, what are we going to be able to get from them? Do you think common sense, you don't have to be an expert, who can look at an injury like this and say, yeah, that came from a bullet? You can't. You can look at it and go, okay, could it be a grazed wound? Sure. So if the defense had an expert that was going to say what they wanted, you heard them. Look at his face. No injuries. No injuries. Nothing. Zero. Still photo from the video. Nothing. That is not the face of somebody that was punched in the face repeatedly, given a beating by a large, strong man less than 24 hours before. Someone who they said was bleeding from an injury to the lip when we see nothing. Why on earth would it make sense for the people to call one of the three individuals who was clearly involved in ambushing Relly in the first place and who was reliant on the defendant for his career? If Ills had anything helpful, they would have called him.
Pointing out witnesses and bullshit like that is burden shifting, but okay.
The defense is it was a prop gun. That's the issue in this case. They say it's a prop gun. They say all the evidence shows it's a prop gun. We say it's firearm. Once you decide that it is a firearm, that means that their entire defense has fallen apart. And now what Mr. Tacopina apparently wants you to do is say, well, even if the witnesses we put on lied, even if it was a real gun, here's why it was self-defense. The defendant used a prop gun, which means self-defense doesn't apply. So as soon as you find that out, you're done. But they're also arguing, hey, if you find, well, there was a gun, even though that's not our argument. And Mr. Tacopina wouldn't come out and say it. But that's what the law is. If you don't believe me, you can ask the judge. Self-defense only applies in this case if it's a real gun. And the problem is, it also only applies if the force used was no more than reasonably necessary to defend against that danger. But even if somehow you wanted to argue, and you know it's a lie, because you can see that the gun, you can't see what the item is. So let's be clear. You can see Rocky pulling something out. You can't tell what it is. But you can then see that what he takes, he ends up putting out in front of him and aiming and shooting. That is what prompts Relly to grab Ills. You don't have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's why the defense didn't really argue it, because they are riding the boat. Their position is the dog was off the leash. So the dog was on the leash. Not that the dog had no teeth, and not that the guy didn't own the dog. But in the end, that's what their argument requires. You have to believe inconsistent defenses. It just doesn't work. He originally said it was 3 to 4 shots. And imagine for a second, Remember, he doesn't know in advance the defendant is going to shoot. So his memory, and you can all, it's not hard to imagine, you're in a situation where you believe you're fighting for your life. How do you know that Relly was fighting for his life? He's telling Wally he was fighting for his life. He's saying, the defendant tried to take it from his daughter. He believes at the time the defendant has fired 3 or 4 shots. And when he talks to Wally, he says 5 shots. That doesn't matter. That's not a question of credibility, and here's why. If Relly were making this up, and remember what they're saying. They're also saying that Relly had to have planted the 9mm casings, okay? And let's talk about that for a second, it's important. They are saying, hey, listen, Relly was out here 2 weeks before this shooting, and we don't know that he went back home. So apparently, Relly planned this out in advance. He got 9mm casings from when he went target shooting, knowing that 2 weeks later, the defendant would be upset with him, would text him repeatedly, and would assault him with a 9mm firearm, and he would have casings ready to put at the scene. But just to make it extra difficult, he's going to tell the cops, you know what, I got shot 3 or 4, there were 3 or 4 gunshots, but he's only going to turn in 2 casings. So remember, if he's making up this whole thing, which of course he isn't, he is certainly going to produce the amount of casings at the scene that he is saying happened. That's an irrefutable concept. And that's not what occurs. And the idea that somehow Relly is Nostradamus and knows all these things are going to happen. And let's look at what had to occur. Relly said, of course I didn't know it was a prop gun. It wasn't a prop gun. It shot me. But the idea, you don't even need Relly's testimony. The idea, they're the ones saying, their defense is, Relly knew it was a prop gun. He stands up and says, put that fake-ass gun away. You look at him in the second incident. Is he acting like that's a fake-ass gun? Is anyone acting like it's a fake-ass gun? Is the defendant acting like it's a fake-ass gun? Of course not, because it wasn't fake. Now, does it make sense that he felt a need to go out and buy a magazine for his gun, and then did not find out for some period of time, he wouldn't say where he bought it, when he bought it, and it was not for the right gun, but he made another mistake that he clearly wasn't aware of. I confronted him with the fact. He said, well, so I realized when I was over there, I tried to put the 9mm, the 380 ammunition in, and it wouldn't fit. Okay. But why was it found loaded completely with 9mm ammunition? As soon as it didn't fit, he would stop. And that's just, well, I'm a fidgety dude. So while I was drinking, I was fidgeting just loading a gun, loading a magazine for a gun I don't have and the defendant doesn't have. ASAP Lou is at the house when the search warrant is served. He didn't even have to go to the police. All he has to do is say, hey, you know what, that magazine, that 9mm magazine, that's mine. By the way, it was a prop gun that he had. Nothing. You know why he didn't say it? Because he hadn't made up the defense yet. That's why. Do you know why 12 didn't say anything? Because he hadn't made up the defense yet. That's what the evidence shows. And then what happened? Literally on February 9th, the morning that Lou was going to testify, we are given information, oh, it turns out that Lou gave the gun to somebody in New York. And that's why they don't have a gun. Now remember, we're finding this out on what is basically the last day of the trial. We don't have the ability to get that person. But the defense, that's someone they've known about all along. Where is he to testify about this gun? They're saying we have to bring this person out here when there's no reason to believe that anything that person is going to say is true. But we're supposed to bring that person out here who we don't even know exists to prove that it's not a prop gun. That it's not a prop gun when that's their witness. Do you not think for a moment that if that witness could have withstood cross-examination, they would have brought him out here? Of course they would have. And how do you know that any of this is true? And if you decide it is a prop gun, for those of you who do, you're going to have to get past all of the nonsensical evidence in this case. You need to ask yourselves, are you following the evidence? Are you following your head, or are you following your heart for whatever reason? Once you do that, the case is over, because that means the defense is fabricated. That means it was a real gun. That means you can't believe anything that was said by any of their witnesses. And that means that in the end, the defendant used a real firearm and committed these crimes. Again, as defense counsel stated, I want to thank you all for your time and for your attention. And I do want to thank Judge Arnold. It's not been an easy case. And I want to ask, to the best of your ability, when you go back there, you pretend that he's not ASAP Rocky. You pretend that he's just a guy named Rakeem Ayers. And you treat him the way you would treat anybody else who was accused of these crimes with this evidence. And when you return a guilty verdict, that is not on you. That's on him, because that is what the evidence has demonstrated. Do not let anybody tell you that you own his conduct. He owns it.
That's pretty much it, man. Deliberations start the day you're watching this video. So there's probably going to be a verdict in the next 24 hours. I see it taking around a few hours, maybe like 3 to 8 hours or something for them to get a verdict, in my opinion. But comment down below what you guys think. Hit subscribe. Love you guys. Peace out.